which then leads us on to tonight's open forum. And I've already got several questions submitted prior to the meeting, and also some in front of me written down already this evening. But of course, if people in the audience have come to ask questions of the committee, that's their right to do so, and please feel free to do. I probably should take these in the order that we've had them, because we've had 3 submitted earlier, 2 from Dr. Eva and 1 from, can you help me with the name? Yeah, a resident of Maltings Close. He didn't actually give a name, did he? He said a resident of Maltings Close in Abbey. Dr. Eva, if I can take your 2 questions first, if that's okay. Do you want to ask the committee the questions? I've had a copy of them. Do we circulate that prior to everybody, or just to try and get you an answer if the officers couldn't attend tonight? Sorry.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good evening, and good evening, councillors. I want to ask a question which refers back to my attendance in a previous meeting here in November 2012 regarding cycle parking. And you'll probably recall that after discussion, it was resolved at that meeting that, quote, where there exists a civic or community interest, the East Area Committee would strive to ensure that all such buildings are made cycle-friendly by providing adequate, free and safe cycle parking by December 2013. So that was an aspiration rather than a commitment. But we've had several years, of course, since then. So I'd now like to know, firstly, how many buildings of civic or community interest were identified within the East Area Committee region? How many of these lacked adequate, free and safe cycle parking? Thirdly, how many sites have since been fitted with adequate cycle parking? And finally, how many sites, if any, remain without adequate, free and safe cycle parking? And if such still exist, what plans are in place to correct the situation?
Thank you, Dr. Eva. And thank you for giving us forewarning of the question. We do have a part-time cycling officer at the City Council, Claire Rankin, who has attended this meeting in the past. So the question was referred to Claire. In terms of the response, it's not certainly not to my satisfaction answering the specific question, but I'll give you the answer. And then I'll give you my sort of view of where we are. In terms of the response from Claire, an audit was scheduled to be done, a cycle provision audit of both council owned and council used community facilities within the East area, and I think there's also the intention was to do the audit across the city as a whole as part of the same schedule. That was to be in association with, I understand from what Claire's saying, helpful members of the cycling campaign at that time. She has tracked back to see where that audit where it is, if it has been produced for our consumption as councillors or brought to one of the committees that deal with cycle matters. That she's not been able to find, so she's not clear whether that has been done or was intended to be done at the time and wasn't done. So she apologises for having a lack of definitive knowledge on that. In terms of the questions, clearly the audit was intended to give a proper analysis of what you were asking in terms of which facilities had them and which didn't, and which ones we would look at as being likely candidates for provision. In terms of my knowledge, certainly of the Peterborough area, there are certainly venues, both community-wise, that have had cycle racks installed in the last 3 years since the original question. Certainly St Barnabas Church, St Paul's Church, the youth hostel, although we don't use it for our own events, clearly has a community role and was given a grant to provide cycle racks there. I'm not sure they were done since the question was asked. I think they were already in training before that question was asked. I can only speak from that local knowledge, and closer to home here, you've asked a question, I think, subsequent to that about a provision here, and I did speak to Michael Bond, trustee of the Cherry Trees, probably over a year ago now, as to when they were submitting their proposals to do up the front in terms of their desire to improve the frontage. That hasn't been pursued. We did look at the area across the road where the derelict, well not derelict, but it's pretty poor condition garages are situated. There's a proposal coming to Housing Committee in March to demolish that whole garage block, and as part of any redevelopment, clearly from a ward point of view, cycling provision, which clearly distance relative to here as well, could be we could be pushing for provision on that site, but I can only speak from a local perspective, and others may wish to give you a view from the east area in terms of their own wards. But apologies, there is not a proper answer from the cycling officer. It doesn't seem to have been, the audit as a whole hasn't been done, from what I can read between the lines, so it's for me as East Area Chair, certainly from an East Area point of view, to have it done within our area, because we said we had an aspiration to do it in 2012, and I think the idea was to do it across the city as well, where we're at it, and if we can find willing partners to assist us, then we will do so, but that's all I can say at this stage. Richard wanted to know. Sorry, Councillor Johnson and then Councillor Kavanagh.
Right. Thanks, Chair. 2 points in terms of my patch in Abbey. I remember when Dr. Weaver laid down his resolution. I subsequently got in touch with Claire Rankin and managed to obtain some funding to get some cycle racks installed outside the River Centre. And I think they were put in around about mid-2013. I can't remember the precise date, but so I think it's incumbent upon us as councillors to be proactive ourselves and to make the individual groundwork. That's what we've been elected to do, as well as trying to seek out officers to do the kind of the high-profile stuff. A second point is that Dr. Weaver may be interested to know that the City Council is currently undertaking a review of community provision, and he may wish to feed in his comments about cycle racks outside community facilities within that review process. Details will follow about how he'll be able to do that himself in due course. And I know that the next East Area Committee, I think, will have an item on the agenda to discuss this very issue, so he may wish to come back now.
Councillor Kavanagh, then Councillor Smart come in. That covers the 3 wards in. Councillor Kavanagh.
Yeah, I recall at our meetings here that we had discussion and responded very positively to the request for cycle racks to be put into, I think, Stoday Street, taking the place of parking areas for vehicles. I think that was seen as a trial, which was going to be, I think it has turned out to be very successful, and is going to be spread to other streets. I also remember we did have a discussion about the refurbishment outside the co-op, and within that discussion there was emphasis to be put on more cycle racks there. The other thing that's it's not directly to do with housing, but it does affect all the cyclists really, is the cycle point. I believe it's on its way to being opened soon at the station, and that's got provision for just less than 3,000 cycles, so that will affect many of the residents of this part of the city, as well as elsewhere. On my own patch, I've noticed down Cherry Hinton Road outside the post office there, and further up there's some cycle racks. So the trend is upwards, and I should imagine Claire Rankin, who's a very able officer, will come with a more detailed audit when she's got time to do it.
Just to clarify though, and perhaps this wasn't clear to councillors, I've certainly seen Dr. Beaver's questions. The gist of the question was how many buildings of civic or community interest were identified within the east area, and that was the question he asked in 2012. I think it was very much to do with some experience at the polling station that year. I think that sort of triggered it, and quite rightly so. And how many of these sort of buildings lacked free and safe cycle parking? How many sites have since been fitted with free and safe cycle parking? And how many sites remain without the adequate free and safe cycle parking? In respect to the question, clearly since 2012, quite a few community venues of that description have had cycle racks provided either through grants from the council or through other cycling promotion funding. But what hasn't been done is the baseline audit, as you asked for in 2012, which we can compare where the gaps still arise. So that still needs to be done, so that we actually know where we apply perhaps our resources if that's seen sensible in the overall sort of budget terms. Because obviously we did have an aspiration, pretty much a commitment to deal with our own sort of buildings and those we use as a council. Councillor Smart.
Yes, our own building we've only got one building in Romsey, and that's the Ross Street Community Centre. It was refurbished recently, and more cycle racks were put in. I think I'm right in saying it's the block on the north that are the new ones, because the ones on the south were already there. So it already had quite a lot, it now has more, double. There are other buildings in Romsey which are of community interest in that the community uses them, mainly churches. And I think they've all got them, or got some. But of course, two of the churches that are used are on Mill Road, and there has been a big push to get more cycle racks on Mill Road. The Thoday Street ones are not really in the same category because they are resident rather than community buildings. And of course, Romsey, I would suspect, rather like Petersfield, there isn't an awful lot of space for anything. And so cycling, now a lot of people I know would put cycle racks at the head of the queue, but a lot of people, not everybody. And in any case, we have to ration the space. So the city council building is well provided for. Other buildings of community interest are provided to a greater or lesser extent. I mean, for instance, some of the new ones that went on this road were put outside the Earl of Beaconsfield. Now, I'm not going to start doing an audit of the cycle racks of every pub in the town. Somebody else can do that.
Yes.
I was waiting.
I think the onus is on community centre type buildings and civic type buildings we use for for city and community events. Yeah, but I think that's a slightly different category probably. Dr. Eve, would you like to come back and apologize?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, it's very encouraging, obviously, to hear that some cycle stands have been installed. I mean, I would just mention that 2 weeks after that meeting back in 2012, I met with Councillor Richard Johnson, and I gave him a list which I'd just compiled from an hour of Googling. It certainly wasn't a comprehensive list, but in that we identified 10 polling stations, these are all within East Area Committee area, 10 polling stations, 2 libraries or museums, 8 schools, 9 churches, 7 parks and 7 miscellaneous sites. So there's at least 43 sites, and that was all listed. So it would be really helpful if perhaps for the next meeting we could have a list of all of these and any others that have been identified, and then just a simple breakdown of which of them have cycle stands of an adequate number and standard and which don't. Thank you.
So you'd like us to extend that to sort of parks and areas within the East area that are used by the community as well, Tony, is that correct?
Would seem useful to me.
Certainly myself and Councillor Robertson are on maybe something else, but we're on a cycling and pedestrian working group, which I think is the right group to look at this, and I will ensure that it's on the agenda for our next meeting, which I think is next month, Tony, and see where we can get for a proper sort of audit, so we actually know where the gaps are and where we need to focus on, really. And apologies that that's not been produced. You have a second question, so if you've got the microphone, I'll let you keep hold of it.
Great, thanks. My second question is regarding the Riverside Promenade. And Cambridge City Council has long had a vision for the Riverside Promenade, which would stretch between Midsummer and Stourbridge Commons. And phase 1 of this project was completed in 2011. The stretch of Riverside between the Riverside Bridge and Stourbridge Common is a popular walking and recreational space along the riverside of the road. Many people make use of this proximity to the river, despite the lack of a footpath on this side of the road and the numerous parked cars which impede access and also impede a clear vision of other road users. Cambridgeshire County Council is currently reviewing parking near to the riverside entrance to Stourbridge Common. Incredibly, they are recommending that parking spaces be maintained between the junction with Stanley Road and the entrance to Stourbridge Common. So this evening, I'd like to propose the following resolution, which is: the East Area Committee notes the plans put forward by Cambridgeshire County Council in their email from John Richards to residents and councillors dated 22nd of January 2016. The East Area Committee reaffirms its long-term vision of a riverside promenade between Midsummer and Stourbridge Commons. As such, it deplores the proposal for parking bays adjacent to the river on Riverside and calls for the introduction of double yellow lines adjacent to the river alongside Riverside between the Riverside Bridge and Stourbridge Common.
Okay, probably allow the Abbey representatives to answer this question. Councillor Whitehead?
Yeah, there is a scheme which John Richards has drawn up and we hope will be going out to consultation of the residents there. And obviously, in light of what the residents say, we will look at how they think about the scheme. I don't think it's the job of this committee to preempt the discussion of the plan before residents have had a chance to comment on that plan. And hopefully we have got, after 2 years of struggle, hopefully we will have a plan that can go out to consultation in the very near future. There are two separate issues. One is the parking, which at the moment is pretty terrible. People are camping there and various things like that. And then the second is the cycle access and pedestrian access to Stourbridge Common. And we've got money for both of those schemes, and they have been put together. And as I say, it is, I think, more or less ready to go out for residents' consultation. So I don't really feel it's the role of this committee to preempt that consultation process with residents.
Any other ward councillor wish to make a comment on the question?
Hi, Tony. I think you know my views on this because we went to a residents' meeting together, and also we've been in contact about this several times. I agree with what Joan's saying. I think let's see what comes back from that consultation. What I would add is that I think in terms of, I mean, if I can speak on behalf of Abbey councillors, I think that we recognise that there should be a riverside vision, and very much so that it seems a bit rum that one end of Riverside, mainly from I believe it's section 106 from the Tesco, looks incredibly beautiful and clean and nice, whereas the other end, which is near the Tesco, obviously is a bit more of a rough deal. If it were down to me, I would have a cycle path all along the railing stroke footpath, because I just think it's a beautiful walk. We've done things recently, as you know, we got the fence repainted, we put in new bins, new dog bins, new litter bins. We did a ward walk the other day to look at some of the actual social issues, the litter-related cleaning issues that I cover at the council. And I know that Richard and Joan have been working obviously on the gate. One thing that I was quite keen to do from our previous correspondence was to make sure, because it's the teams that we have at the council, which come under my portfolio on the council, do streets and open spaces, that use the gate, hence why the gate has to have access for cars, for council vehicles. We put an awful lot of pressure talking to officers, and I'm glad from seeing the initial email exchanges that have been going on that it now looks like we'll be using the Oyster Row entrance, enabling to make it even more accessible in terms of for cyclists by having essentially the two-way entrance along the riverside, but also on top of that to make the likelihood, I would feel, that should parking potentially be removed, not necessarily now but in the future, that the fence is ready, one of the most expensive bits of the whole project. Apart from that, I mean, as I say, we have an awful lot of issues in streets and open spaces to do with Riverside. It's a complicated array of issues. It's CCTV at that end, if you remember last year. Now the county telling us we can't put up the CCTV anymore because their lampposts can't support it, and all this sort of ridiculousness that we've had to deal with. And I think we've come an awful long way in a relatively short space of time that at least my party have been in control of the council. And I just hope we can get that final push, because I do know from the figures, I haven't seen the exact figures, but from what John Richards has mentioned, the figures of cyclists and pedestrians going through that gate on Stourbridge Common is astronomical. And with the new bridge, which this committee has supported as well, and also put money into at the initial stage, that's only going to get higher. And we feel that there are a number of issues that we're teetering on the edge of just getting to where we want to be, but we're still not quite there. So I think we shouldn't rest on our laurels, but we should definitely push towards a Riverside vision that does have that promenade all the way down. So I mean, I've always been in favour of it, as you know. So I don't know if Richard wants to say anything.
Yeah, I'll make a comment on the first part of the question from the East Area point of view, and I think Councillor Whitehead has sort of answered perhaps the second part, in that there's a consultation either forthcoming or currently, and obviously views will be expressed and decisions at the end of that will be made. But in terms of the long term, and this is how long is the long term, I think we clearly supported both in principle and in financial terms the first part of this promenade vision, and I'm trying to remember how many years ago it would be now, probably 6-7 years ago at least. But it was clearly understood that the extra probably £2 million to complete it, because we did a third of it for 650,000, and probably the rest will be certainly of the same sort of financial sort of sum. If we had the resources to do it, I think we would be inclined to complete the whole promenade and see the vision sort of come to fruition. But as things stand at the moment, we haven't got that money. Therefore, in the shorter term, other practical sort of issues are being looked at, and obviously that is part of the consultation that you clearly have a strong view on, and we'll let the consultation and ward council particularly sort of try and make sense of that. But certainly as an East Area, we do still support the long-term vision. I'm sure we all do, in terms of what we would like to do for that Riverside promenade, and if it ever came through before we depart this planet, then that would be great for us all to see. But we haven't got the money at this present time. That's the basic facts of it, I think. Do you want to come back? I'll let you come back, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, we recognise you don't have the money to do this at the moment, of course. It would be very useful, I think, if it could be minuted or resolved in some way that this committee does reaffirm its long-term vision for the Riverside Promenade between the two commons. I think that would be very useful. From a personal point of view, I don't see how that sits at all with County then introducing 6 parallel parking bays.
Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, there are residents who live down there, and presumably they need somewhere to put their cars.
There's plenty of parking space available in front of my own apartment building, which are used by commuters coming in from who knows where, parking their vehicles rather than using park and ride, taking out bikes from the back. and riding along. So there isn't an issue with residents parking.
I think as an East Area Committee, I think we still have a desire to see the long-term vision of the Riverside Promenade. I still think that's the case. We had strong support for it previously, and I still think that's the case. And if anybody wishes to say I've misjudged that, then say now. But I think we're quite happy to reaffirm our commitment to the longer-term vision. But clearly there are practicalities to deal with in the interim and in the shorter term, and that's, I think, and you obviously expressed your view and will continue to do so, which is obviously your right to do. But members happy for us to confirm our support for the principle of the longer term vision. Yeah?
Can I just ask you, we would agree that even though it may involve knocking down houses, we'd be quite happy with that, wouldn't we?
I don't think any of us, I don't think any of us foreseen the knocking down of houses. That's why, no.
That might suddenly
No, that wasn't part of the vision. No. The vision was to make a very attractive part of the promenade after Stourbridge Common up to Elizabeth Way roundabout, and we've only completed a third of it. But you can see the difference, and obviously residents see the difference every day, and people who use it see the difference every day. But okay, so we're happy to meet at that point. We reaffirm. Excuse me, have one conversation, please. We are happy as a committee to reaffirm our support for that longer term vision. Yeah? Okay, thank you. I've got another question that's been submitted, but I have a feeling there may be quite a few councillors wish to contribute to that. So if the resident of Maltings Close could wait till I've had the other 3 questions asked and answered, that may be helpful. So I think these might be shorter answers, he says, hopefully. Margaret, you want to ask your question or do you want to read it out? Margaret Cranmer.
I commend the council for their work removing graffiti and fly tipping in Tennyson Road area, but we have a serious problem with bins. In October, I sent photographs and explained that the businesses in Mill Road who are supposed to keep their bins in the alleyway, basically all the bins are on the pavement, because some of those businesses have decided to use the alleyway for parking, despite the fact it's probably a fire escape from the backs of the businesses. And I've spoken to this on the corner, and they said, we cannot get our bin out on time because the car's parked there. And one young man who has a business there was struggling to get deliveries made. And I was somewhat amused, well, perhaps amused, annoyed, this morning, to be referred back with a nice holding letter to the person to whom I sent the complaint originally. So it would be very helpful if this could be progressed, because I see in the environmental report they're claiming that they've solved some of the business problems with bins in this area.
Okay, so that's a request for action, really, isn't it? As a repeated request for action that you explained to us last time. Councillor Roberts.
Margaret, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'll be speaking to you in the break, so if I can get some further details on that. But what I would say is when Wendy comes up, I'm sure Wendy will talk about what she can do in terms of the person who runs a lot of our public realm, and especially our teams that go around and talk to the business and also to residents about leaving bins out too long or in inappropriate places for people with pushchairs, people, the elderly, people trying to go about their business. So if you'll be here for when Wendy replies officially. I think Wendy wants one.
Well, I'm tempted as a ward councillor to raise that as a consideration for a priority under the environmental priorities that we discuss later. So if Margaret's happy to stay on for that item, then we'll leave it for that whole discussion. Is that right? Okay. Mr. Carpenter, you have 2 questions. Do you want to ask them?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are going to be people watching this when you look at the last YouTube stats. Question number 1, councillors. A couple of years ago, we had some really successful visits by several members of this committee to Coleridge School, in particular meeting the Year 9s and Year 10s. I just wondered if those visits are going to be repeated for the new cohorts of students coming through. Thank you.
I seem to remember it was envisaged that we did have a return visit at some point, and the principal was keen on that.
We've had other groups come to the Guildhall, including from Long Road, but yeah, I mean, we haven't been asked by the principal, but if we were...
There's a new principal there.
Yeah, then hopefully she's seeing this film and we will say yes.
And as East Area, we can offer the, the proposal that we happy, members or small number of members would happily come again if that was something they felt useful to the students.
I'd certainly be willing to go again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that'd be an action point then, won't it? Yeah. That we
we can
contact the new principal and say we're happy to come back again in light of the perceived success of the previous visit. Okay. And your second question, Mr. Cullen?
Second question. I can't even see me on there. There have been a number of new refurbished and opened cafes on Cherry Hinton Road, and they don't seem to have any community notice boards. Ditto on some of the more busier bus stops at the western end of Cherry Hinton Road, given that there are something like 2,000 sixth formers up at Hills Road that use that area regularly. Can I ask council officers to liaise in particular with the firms that I've mentioned and also with the bus companies to get something up there that just advertises just the existence of the councils and the councillors and how to get in touch with them, in particular on social media, given the big push that has been made on all things citizenship in schools and colleges locally. Thank you.
That's one of the World Councillors would like to...
Well, I'll pick the issue up. I mean, there is an unused community notice board on, I think, Cowper Road, but we'll have a look. I mean, there are a couple of mysteries that the committee needs to get to the bottom of, and one of those is what's happening to the bus shelters, which we'd agreed on that road. So I think there's a couple. It's just a question of where we can put them. I mean, if I'll put it the way of the people doing environmental improvements and see if we can get some options. So it's useful, but then we need to then link them in with the update notices that go out to places like Parkside Pool, College Rec's got a notice board, a number of other places. So I'll take it up and I'll get back to Mr. Carlin.
Yes, I know they're still wrestling with trying to come up with a design for a bus shelter type set up at the stop near the carpet shop, which has about a 4-foot pavement or 5-foot pavement, which is quite problematic, but I'll leave you to.
And I'd like to ask if it would be possible to install some sort of temporary loo that could be used in the winter and it would add at capacity in the summer. If we can't address the existing ones, let's just do something different. And while we're on the subject, may I just quickly say that it's great that the debris left by all the improvements has finally been cleared, but there's still a huge gap in the fencing, which is a big problem for children. And the fencing seems to have disappeared. So I don't know what's happening there, but it would be good to have that sort of looked at. And just a last comment is that it used to be, and there is still one sign that says no cycling in the park. But the rest of the signs have gone, and there's quite a lot of cycling, which doesn't, from adults, which makes it difficult for the kids. And it's a bit unnecessary because the roads around it, there's no cut through. It doesn't save anybody time. They're just in the park rather than on the roads around. So I think that would benefit from being looked at.
Okay, 3 parts of that question. Councillor Roberts, you probably have an answer to the first part, and Councillor Herbert perhaps for the other points.
Okay, in terms of the public conveniences, as things currently stand, the toilets across the city, obviously, depending on their location, some are opened all year round, some are opened at certain points during the year. We have a review coming to committee in a few months' time, actually, about toilets across the city. and there will be potentially a range of recommendations ranging from looking at our provision on open spaces in particular, because we're quite keen with public conveniences on open spaces, which we think are amongst the most important public conveniences the city provides, that we look at a whole range of things from opening times amongst other things. So what I'll do is that reviews, the office is currently in the process of doing it, including with the Silver Street toilets, which you might have read about in the newspaper and different things. If you could put those comments essentially to be in an email, and I will make sure they're fed into the review as, and then it comes back, I believe, in June, I think, to committee. But as things currently stand at present, as a city authority, we spend there is truly astronomical amounts of money on public conveniences, more so than almost any other council per head in the whole of the UK. We have more public conveniences than, I believe, Nottingham, Birmingham. Not Birmingham, Birmingham's got 21 blocks, we've got 20, I believe. I think they've got one more than us. So you get the feeling for the similar sized area to us is Bath, and Bath had more or less the same numbers of conveniences as us, and they went through a similar sort of process of looking at rationalising what they had and working out what needs to be, what's in very good locations, and what needs to be made the most of, hence why we're currently going through the process with Silver Street and rebuilding it, because it is one of the most used public conveniences. The ones on public spaces are the most used public conveniences. So that instead of rebuilding loos that people don't use, there's one in my ward, Barnwell Road, which most people don't know about.
Can we stick to Coleridge Rec though, please, Councillor Roberts?
Yes, sorry. So anyway, if you email me about that, then I will make sure. I could talk about toilets all day long, but I will feed it in, and what I'll also do is I'll email you when it's due at committee, so you can come and address committee with your concerns. And just one last point in regards to the asbestos point you made, I honestly don't know. I'll ask. I don't think that is the case. I would be surprised. I think it's more to do with just we do shut public loos in the winter, do it based on usage.
Councillor Peter Roberts, is there anything of your...
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I've got...
well, Jeremy's going to talk about loos, I think.
Councillor Baird.
About Coleridge loos.
Yeah. Yes, picking up on thank you, Chair, picking up on what Councillor Roberts was saying about the actual situation at Coleridge Rec toilets. My understanding is it wasn't an asbestos issue, and I would like to scotch that one straight away. What it is, as those of us who know that building well, it's not one of the most modern buildings in the world, and it was prone to freezing up, and so in the winter it was closed down so that the pipe and drained down, and so that the pipes didn't explode and needed a lot of work to put them right afterwards. There were other reasons why the toilets were closed at different times of the year, but we seem to have got over the other issues that were going on in and around Coleridge Rec then. I think the public open spaces that we've got, somebody circulated on the email the other day an interesting photograph looking down across Hills Road, over the railway lines, across Coleridge and into the far distance of Abbey. And though it looked a very green and pleasant area, the actual only piece of actual public open space in that photograph was Coleridge Rec, and it provides a very big service in that particular area of the city. I've often said this at these meetings, but we councillors think in terms of ward boundaries, and the public don't. And Coleridge Rec does serve a very large area. Hence the amount of investment that's been put into it recently to upgrade the facilities. I will certainly be pressing for the toilets to and as I have done with Councillor Roberts in the past, pressing for the toilets to be upgraded, and in the hope that they could be a 12-month facility. There may be other ways that could be achieved, but in the summer months, in the winter months, the Coleridge Rec is very popular with young children, and the summer is very popular with older people as well. And speaking as somebody who is an older person, it might 21 public toilets may seem an awful lot, but sometimes they're an awful long way apart.
I think that's Councillor, would you like to answer the two other points about
Well,
signage?
ward councillors were at the REC last week, not to use either the toilets or play tennis, but we noticed the problem with the sort of contractors area was still some rubble, so we speeded that up. But we take your point about the fence, so we'll follow that up. There is still a small amount of the improvement money remaining. So in addition to wanting to remove ivy and stop trees falling over that are completely covered in it, and opening up the entrance, if the Friends or other people locally have got any suggestions that are sort of including addressing your signage issue, which I've noted, then do drop us a line, because it's not a huge sum of money, but there's a few thousand left just to make some minor improvements.
May I say that actually that the entrance needs a lot of work, because it's totally overgrown and it actually doesn't feel very safe, because you can't see going into it who might be lurking.
Well, in addition to that, sorry Chair, but I thoroughly endorse that, and also it is, as Councillor Benstead was referring to an aerial photo, well, from the ground on Coleridge roadside you can't actually see the park, so I think people would actually see that it's a lovely open area and be attracted more into it, as well as you say, removing something that's an eyesore.
So that will happen. Okay, Councillor Roberts, you want to come back, but very quickly, hopefully.
Sorry. If you, when you email me, if you include that issue and I'll take on the fence issue from Councillor Herbert, simply because it's the same officer who'll be dealing with who'll be dealing with the same issue in relation to the toilets. It's the same overarching officer that would deal with both. And then thirdly, on your point about I'm hoping you'll stay for the point where Wendy Young, who works for the council and her teams, do the public realm issues. And I'm sure Councillor Herbert will offer up that entrance issue with the overhanging and so on is one of the priorities for Coleridge for an environmental improvement, which Wendy will then take up with her team.
Councillor Cavan, do you still want to come back?
Well, it's just a couple of things. I'm really pleased to hear the positive contributions about the toilets, because I have raised them in the past. Because one thing I did notice, Nightingale Avenue has a park there, and the toilets seem to be open during the winter, and also Cherry Hinton Park. So I think I'd like to have the kind of consistency within our territory on toilets. The other thing we have invested in is the new tennis courts at Coleridge Park, which are really well used even in the winter. That's another reason to get some toilets in there. And I think it was a great suggestion, temporary toilets in the meantime, while we're waiting for funds to do a proper job. There were new signs invested for the tennis courts. Unfortunately, there are people using those tennis courts for other activities rather than tennis. In fact, I remember I did answer a group who came here, and they were called polo cyclists. And they were saying they wanted a place to use, but unfortunately they're starting to use our tennis courts. And I've become a kind of surrogate park keeper. I'm going to get turfing people off. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead, last one, this question please.
No, I was just going to say, I think I mentioned last time, a scheme that's been quite successful elsewhere, which is rather than building lots of public loops, is persuading pubs and hotels, restaurants and other places to allow the general public to use their facilities. And I mean, I think that's perhaps more in rural areas, but certainly in the area where I come from originally, Saddleworth, there are quite a lot of pubs that have done that. And, it does seem to me to be, if we can encourage people to do that, it saves us building an awful lot of loops.
Yes, there's not many pubs in Coleridge, by the way. No. But anyway, that's from local knowledge. Martin, you had your hand up. Do you still want to ask a question?
Yes, I'd like to sort of word.
Mr. Lucas Smith.
Two quick questions.
Firstly, as you all know, or probably have noticed, Mill Road is about to receive a Sainsbury's, which I'm sure is very heavily under demand, given the shortage of places selling food. I happened to be on Mill Road about a year ago and came across Pizza Hut delivering to their premises, basically blocking the road for about half an hour, with drivers having actually waited about 10 minutes, I think, been stuck on Mill Road. And the operatives were basically saying, oh, the company will pay the 60 quid fine. And it seems to me that that kind of activity is completely inappropriate. Obviously it creates a lot of safety issues. It also delays people, whether they're cyclists or motorists, obviously. I wonder whether councillors would be in favour of police actually booking such vehicles for obstruction and taking much action rather than just treating this as a kind of, traffic warden 60 quid kind of issue. Because it was, I mean, I've got the video on YouTube which I could circulate, but it was really quite atrocious. So that was the first question. Secondly, this is a question for Petersfield councillors. I just wanted to ask whether Petersfield councillors live or ever walk around Petersfield. I live on York Street, and about a month ago, 2 months ago, a proposal to put a gate between York Street and the Beehive Centre was proposed, which blatantly was completely stupid because it would mean that everyone who cycles there would have to squeeze through a 1 metre gap, along with pedestrians carrying shopping and so on. I mean, I just cannot understand how such a proposal went that far without someone seeing the very obvious problem there. So can I just have an explanation as a matter of public record as to how on earth that ridiculous proposal got there? Thankfully, I mean, there was no consultation, despite the fact that probably thousands of people go through there. I happen to live locally, found it and raised it with the officer, but could I have an answer on that, please, from the Petersfield Council?
I'll answer the second part. Yeah, if you would, Councillor.
I don't know if Miss Lucas Smith has ever met Richard Wood of Perron Street, who is a one-man crusade for a traffic regulation order to stop pavement parking on Mill Road. I think it might be worthwhile, because this is, as you might imagine, a perennial issue for the committee, if I get an officer note written on, the pros and cons, the viability of a TRO, because presumably, well, we can find out in the next item, perhaps we might want to raise it in the next item, but I presume there would have to be a TRO for the police to book, so that would have to be the first step. But we can take, presumably, with your Vice Chair, take Sergeant Norton's advice on that.
That could be...
Not on pavement parking, so...
You may wish to ask a question under the next item. So.
Yeah, I think it's probably better.
Okay, in terms of York Street, Martin, we've had some correspondence, obviously, with this. So I had a request from residents in York Street to back onto Rope Walk in terms of a lot of tension and friction that was occurring, particularly in late summer, early autumn, and there was almost an altercation at one point whereby the area concerned has become known to be a free parking facility for all sorts of people, that residents who back onto that lane, as it were. It's not an adopted road, it's a lane at the back of their houses. We're getting fed up with. So I tried to sort of assist the situation by trying to get a solution put forward. Clearly, the suggested location of the gate originally was certainly not thought through. I think I do know who suggested it, but I won't mention names because I'm not 100% sure that was the case, but certainly alerted by yourself and others, and one or two of us had a closer look as to what was proposed, and obviously told them to hold fire and let's find a more suitable location. So apologies on behalf of myself for not spotting that earlier, and it should have been thought through a lot more strategically rather than just as a local level matter, and I think that was the issue. There was a desire to do something quicker without actually enough thought as to what was the longer term implication. But obviously that was changed, and this problem obviously was a serious problem, and it was causing a lot of friction, and a solution has been put in place, and we'll see if that deals with the issue. But I'll certainly apologise on behalf of those, because I was involved in the discussion myself and didn't spot it early enough. In terms of, yeah, we're going to hold the second one back to the next item, yeah? Sarah, the committee secretary, has explained to me that the resident of Maltings Close had submitted a question but wanted me to read it out. I wasn't. And I know various members have seen it, and it is a long question. I'm just trying to think if I can summarise it in a shorter way, but essentially it refers to, this is on behalf of a resident in Maltings Close who says they're representing other residents in Maltings Close. I do prefer to have a name to any question that's asked of this committee, or any committee for that rate, but as it seems a genuine question, I will put it to the committee. I would like to bring the attention of this forum, East Area Committee. The piece of land behind the Leper Chapel is called the Chapel Meadows and proposed to be part of the route for the Chisholm Trail. It has 3 important designations. It's a city wildlife site, part of the inner green belt and part of a historical conservation area. Expert reports and council policy documents require that it should be protected and preserved, hence not developed in any way. It is currently undisturbed by public access. I and other residents are incredulous that in the recent consultation, the facts that this land has 3 designations were not given to the public anywhere in the background information. That was A. B. Instead, information of this section of the route was highly skewed, presenting only positive views about the opportunities created. C. The facts which were omitted would have a significant effect upon whether the public supported or opposed this section of the route. I think I have other concerns about the scope of the survey. That was the consultation that went through certainly all the doors in Abbey, because I got one through my door, being very unclear to the public, and that there was unequal treatment of stakeholders who are likely to have concern about the use of the Chapel Meadows. For the benefit of members of the committee not familiar with Abbey, Maltings Close is one of the new cul-de-sacs off Ditton Walk that look out over what is in effect the meadows before the chapel. Yeah, I think that gives a gist of the question. There's a little bit more, but I'm conscious that that's probably enough information I've given to elicit a reply from the Ward Council, particularly who have seen the full question. I know there's a list here that have seen the full question. There's probably 3 or 4, at least on the committee, who haven't, but I've got a copy here. Councillor Johnson, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I'll just give my view on the issue, and thank you very much for the residents of Maltings Close who's attended this evening. And I have actually spoken to her before, and I've met with her before, so I'm aware of her issues. But in terms of the Chisholm Trail, vis-a-vis the route, I personally believe that the route as proposed is acceptable, and I think it respects achieving the difficult. It meets achieving the difficult balance between of respecting the natural environment, the heritage of East Kingston Abbey, and providing an important route linking Abbey up with the north and northeast and south of the city. But I do understand and do respect the differences of opinion here, and I note the concerns expressed. And I've got a response here from Mike Davey, who is the Cycling Projects Officer at the County Council. He acknowledges, in response to the question submitted, he says he acknowledges the area is a conservation area, a greenbelt and wildlife site. However, these distinctions don't necessarily mean the area is unsuitable for a new cycle path. Mr. Davis reaffirms that the area is subject to planning, that the area for the route is subject to planning permission, and that councillors and officers will need to carefully consider the scheme proposed. In terms of wildlife, ecological surveys are being undertaken to identify the present situation, which will feed into the planning process. In terms of the process, the consultation, the question that queried the consultation process and said it was unfair. I've got the consultation questions were decided with input from City Deal Transport, the communications team, the Cambridge Research Group, and the cycling projects team. And prior to the public consultation, the projects team met with the majority of landowners and tenants along the route. A stakeholder briefing was held prior to the consultation. This was focused at groups and organisations and included groups that are not supportive of the proposed route, including Friends of Curdham's Common and Friends of Ditton Meadows. 10,500 homes received materials about the consultation, along with other communication channels and a stall at Stourbridge Fair. Moulton's Close residents did contact the County Council midway through the consultation process, expressing their concerns and saying that they need more time and information to submit their views. I understand that John Grimshaw from the County Council visited Moulton's Close residents to discuss the proposals. So, in terms of just wrapping up, the City Deal Board decided to forward the proposed plan for the Chisholm Chell to for planning application, and that planning process still needs to be pushed through. So there's still time to make representations at that stage as well.
Okay, and I'll let Councillor Smart come in, but just the three requests of us at the East area, having already explained the sort of background to the question. One, to request that my councillors, whether that person means my in terms of Abbey councillors, I'm not sure, but this is East area, so we take it on board as East area councillors, to take action to ensure a fair process in the consultation, and that, for example, what weight specific survey results will be given in future decisions. I think there are probably councillors on this committee who have quite an input into the dealing with the assessment analysis of the consultation, as do all councillors in the area where this part of the route is envisaged. I'm sure they will give fair hearing to all the points that are raised, either for or against the section of the route under discussion. I think that's needs to be said. The second, it refers to, I request my councillors to explain the apparent infringement of council policy in developing this land, i.e. the Chapel Meadows, when there are alternative routes available. Clearly, any proposals resulting from a recommendation at the end of the consultation period will take into account council policies, planning and otherwise, and we'll have to work within those. And clearly, parts of the city have designations, conservation area status and the like, and they are all part of the deliberations when you discuss the sort of the practical side of all this, and that will be done. And obviously policies are important and will be part of that balance. And the second one, I think I'll also ask my councillors for details of which stakeholders were contacted before the consultation. I think there was a stakeholders meeting which all the known residents associations in the area were invited to. It may well be that Moulton's Close is a residents group that isn't known on the database of either the city or the county, because it's a fairly new residential development, and we must ensure that group is included in any future consultations about anything that's happening within their sort of vicinity. I think that may well be the crux of that particular issue. They probably weren't formally invited at that stakeholder meeting, which is, again, apologies if that was the case, but that may well be because the database wasn't as up to date as it should be. Councillor Smart.
It was exactly that point I wanted to go back to, because I was one of those that was sent this email. Obviously, a residents group so near the trail should have been in part one of the stakeholders, and I just wonder, are they in touch with FECA? Are they on the list? is the county using the list that the city has? Can we be sure that in these consultations, and we've got a bit of a flurry of consultations going on at the moment, that the residents groups list is up to date? I don't know. I mean, I think this is obviously. I suspect they weren't on the list, as you say. It's a new development. Can we have ought we to have a bit of publicity to get residents' associations onto our list? But fundamentally, is the county liaising with the city? Because on the whole, the city has a reasonable list of residents' groups. Are the county using that list?
Councillor Cameron, I think there is a list that's across both city and county, but perhaps you'd like to...
Yeah, well, to my understanding, this group were actually visited by John
Yeah, but
Green.
later.
No, but
weren't on stage.
they've been fully aware of all the proposals as all these people have been sent the letters, in their thousands. So they had a personal visit from Mr. Grimshaw, who's actually the consultant who's been acting on behalf of the County Council to put together proposals for the city deal. He's also been negotiating with all the land owners, and he's been doing a very, very good job in coming up with a trail that seems to be gaining wide acceptance. And this group are actually coming in quite late, and as I said, they've already been consulted. They've also had, I believe, some very positive proposals put to them so that they could actually benefit from having the trail going close to their homes. I'll also emphasise that the Chisholm Trail is on the agenda at the next City Deal Assembly meeting. So all stakeholders, everyone who has an interest in the trail will have an opportunity to come and make their views known there. And as you know, the Assembly is not a decision-making assembly. The decisions will be made later on by the executive of the city deal, and then we also have the planning officer involved. So they haven't been overlooked. They've had every opportunity to be involved, and they have been involved. So
There will be obviously opportunities to comment at further stages of the process as well.
yeah.
Okay, I think we had a fairly good public forum session this evening. Is there any other questions that people are coming to raise here tonight? Or can I move to the next item?